And from the City of Flagstaff. And again, it's always a pleasure to be here and testify before the commission. A couple of comments with regard to the maps that were just discussed. The city remains supportive of the rural district concepts, and it's something that the city is would like the commission to look favorably towards. When it comes to addressing some of the comments and discussions on rural versus metro interfaces, the city believes in its value statement that retaining competitive districts are one of the means for addressing that interface in terms of ensuring that the district retains representation for the communities within. And as such, the city of Flagstaff would like to be retained within one of those districts that is deemed competitive. With regard to the communities of interest, while the mapping configuration that shows an eastern district that interfaces an international border as one of the alternatives, the city considers the communities of interest to be the mountain areas, the rim areas, and would look at discussions on transportation, looking at forest health issues, and those are the areas that the city would like to consider when it comes to the congressional districting on the eastern side of the state. And so consideration at this point is not necessarily in alignment with the international border. With regard to the northern part of the state, the city again offers its map configuration of the congressional district as the best alternative that meets the interests for northern Arizona, and would again resubmit that in terms of consideration for discussion. So thank you very much, commissioners.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Great. I believe that ends our mapping presentation agenda item. Thank you all for taking time to put those together. It is a lot of hard work, and we appreciate all the ideas and efforts. Our next item on the agenda is to do the review, discussion, and direction to mapping consultant on congressional draft maps. The time's 1:30. Does anyone need a quick break? Okay, we'll take a quick 10-minute break and come back at 1:40. Thank you.
Oh, boy, that would be good.
They don't like touching the urban.
The time is 1:44, and we'll go ahead and end recess and get back into the meeting. We are at agenda item 3, review, discussion, and direction to mapping consultant regarding the development of a congressional draft map based on constitutional criteria. This has been a recurring agenda item for weeks now, and I wanted to check in with our mapping consultant to see what they were able to accomplish for us on this.
Thank you. So for today we have 3 maps, 2 legislative and 1 congressional. By and large, these maps haven't been discussed in public as far as the criteria. They have been a little bit. So I think maybe for today, the commissioners who have submitted the requests could kind of go through them a little bit and explain their thinking, if that works with everyone. The 2 legislative maps have some population imbalance that would need to be definitely corrected and looked at. So I think it's probably best to think of them as kind of a working map, you know, how far they've gone. So I think it might be helpful if the commissioners would like, they can either give me some direction today on how to make a later version, or they can take what's here, study it, and then we can come back tomorrow and do it. Also, at some point I'd like to discuss other maps that will be ready for tomorrow and make sure I have everything that the commission needs.
Great, thank you. Well, I think I will take over then, because I see that the congressional grid map that got created was one that I was specifically requesting, and I very much appreciate you guys getting that done for me, because I know I sent this to you late yesterday afternoon, so didn't have a lot of time. But I think all of the commissioners would agree that we've been hearing a lot of the same themes. And all of the what-if scenarios, the different maps that we've been creating, I think have been really great in exploring some of that public input, while also trying to keep tribal lands whole and keeping 2 majority-minority districts and just some of the standard things that we all agree we have to do. So what I thought I'd do is try to bring it all together into one map, which is a challenge, but there were great aspects in all of the maps that we've created, I think, and so I tried to take the best that I thought from those maps and try to put them into one, because my primary goal really is so that we can begin to work off one map. And I'm hoping that I've captured hopefully actually I've captured everything that we have talked about, but you'll notice there's a spot in the middle that's blank. That's the unassigned area, which would ultimately have 4 districts drawn into it. So that's the hole, so to speak. And we've been talking about the donut hole, but I was thinking, since this is an everything map, this is an everything bagel. And if we could start affectionately referring to it as that was kind of my thinking. So starting with, I had Mr. Desmond start with whole county map 6D, because that seemed like the most closely aligned with what I had in mind in terms of trying to accomplish 2 rural districts and 3 border districts. So start with number 1, and you can see it's pretty, I think from 6D, the only difference was to capture the Kaibab and Pi tribes and keep Coconino County whole per the Navajo Nation proposal, and that's what District 1 now is reflecting, and I have it going all the way down into Cochise County, with Cochise County border, or county line being the border. Number 2, I just had him adjust CD2 down to the border, and on your maps you'll see there's a wayward 8 on there that shouldn't be there. That's just a tag left over from something else, so that's, you can disregard that. But I did split Santa Cruz County kind of along census tract lines, and then followed up along I-19, and then into the Tucson area. Once I got into the Tucson area, I went up I-10 pretty much, so you can see that pretty easily on your map. And then I did include Saddlebrook as part of that district, since that's a community of interest, some input that a lot of input that we've had. And then over to District 3, which is a majority-minority district, and it's grabbing a few places like Eloy, Arizona City, Picacho, Red Rock, and Stanfield, as well as into Maricopa County, just Tolleson and Avondale, to kind of maintain that majority-minority district, those levels. I have the population of Goodyear and Buckeye in an unassigned area. And then I preserved what the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government did, or submitted, where they had the Yuma split. So the River District goes almost the whole length of the state, but again stops at that border where they had it. 7 on your map is just the other majority-minority district, preserving that. And so that leaves the rest that's unassigned. And my hope is that that this is a start for one map that maybe we can start to adjust these lines from. And you know, for this center area, there's a lot to figure out, but I know a lot of you have done a lot of thinking on other maps, and some of that maybe can be incorporated into it. And of course, these edges are adjustable as necessary, but this is sort of what I thought made some sense based on everything we've heard so far. I would say that for that middle area, you know, just as an independent, I think it'd be really worth checking into whether we could create a competitive district in that center unassigned area. You know, that's of course equally weighing all the other criteria that we have to consider, and of course following the very specific language that's in our Constitution, where it can't be to a significant detriment to other goals, But I do think that it kind of makes sense too, since we are creating a new district this time. I thought it'd be interesting to explore the idea of maybe that's CD District 9, since that's the new district, and could that be a competitive district in Metro Phoenix area? And so I would just sort of challenge other commissioners to think about that and see if that's something that we could do. And granted, we're balancing all kinds of things here, but I did think that would be worth considering. So given that, I'd be open to anybody's thoughts and comments on this.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
just looking at the boundary of the unassigned area, it looks like it, and I'm just asking this as a question, it's not a comment or really anything on it. It looks like you've got Apache Junction and then Queen Creek, South Chandler. Does that go down into the Santan Valley?
I'm not sure. I didn't give our mapping consultant specific directions. It would have been whatever was on 6D for that area. Can you comment?
I will turn on the layer where you can see the different census places, and then make the
Yes, it does. And you've got Gold Canyon there included as well. Okay.
Any other questions or comments on this? And
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, this particular map keeps the majority-minority district 7 below, or makes it below the current benchmark.
Mm-hmm.
And then it increases District 3 substantially from the current benchmark. So can you address those issues?
Sure. I think that, yeah, right now they're kind of very similar, I believe, when I checked these numbers last, the HVAP number, both in the 56 range now. District 7's boundaries could be adjusted, if those need to be increased at all. That is sort of the million-dollar question, is what levels do those need to be at in order to achieve pre-clearance and not have a Section 5 violation. So, these aren't hard and fast boundaries, and we can do some tweaking around the edges, but this is sort of the framework I was thinking that maybe we could all begin to do that adjustment and figure out what makes the most sense.
Okay. And one last question. When are we going to get the competitiveness model for this particular map? Because I would love to see it.
Yeah, actually, there is, they were able, our mapping consultants were able to put something together. It's the last page of the splits report, or close to that. And so, and again, we haven't decided really on our competitiveness measures, and
So which?
oh yeah, do you have it on, no, that's compactness.
I can speak to
It's
that.
on here.
Following Ken's presentation last week, he talked about some new measures of competitiveness. So I think moving forward, what we'll be doing is running a wholly separate report that's now included towards the back. It'll be off of that initial data table, and there's a competitiveness report. It might be useful if, just for this first time, if I go through and kind of explain what those numbers are.
That would be, thank you.
And Ken, feel free to come up here if you won't need to clarify anything from the lectern, but I think I understand. So the index 2 is the average Republican in statewide races in 2008 and 2010. That's very similar to the measure we've been using. The state average there is 54.3. So what this tells you is not necessarily are these 50-50 districts, but how far are they from the statewide average. In his last presentation, Ken showed that using the average election results, a difference of 3 either way seemed to make very competitive districts. When we use the party registration number, a difference of 5 seemed to indicate competitive districts. So index number 3 is those same numbers, but with party registration also factored in. This first report ran onto 2 pages, so if you go to the next page, you see the 4th column. We'll make sure we get that all in one page to make it easier to see in the future. So then looking at that, you can kind of see that the distance to the state average. I think Ken had, looking at this, maybe had some other changes planned, so I'll let him speak to that.
Thank you. One of the other measures that we had talked about before is distance from 50-50, or another way of putting it, the distance between the 2 major party votes. And so that's another measure that we'll add to this report starting tomorrow. As the chairwoman mentioned, the commission has not adopted an official measure of competitiveness, so we're trying to include many of the ones that have been requested or discussed, and if there are other measures that people would like to see, please let us know.
That would be great, thanks. So it's kind of interesting, and obviously these aren't final numbers, but just on this framework itself, we have it looks like a competitive rural, a competitive Metro Tucson, and then, that's why I'm saying I think having one competitive Metro Phoenix is reasonable. And that's where I was sort of also going with this. I do think having 3 border districts is also is a really compelling idea. I know Mr. Sturts mentioned this a long time ago, and I don't see how by having an additional voice in Washington representing border issues is a detriment. So I would like to see us preserve 3 border districts if it's as long as we're able to also achieve all the other criteria too. But I thought that this map sort of might allow us to do that. So.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera.
I think we can create more than one competitive district in Maricopa County. I think we can actually create 2. And if you look at the river district map, that's the intent of that particular map, is creating as many competitive districts as possible. Again, I don't see the criteria for is missing a couple, or am I not reading it correctly? The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Does it have all of them in here?
All the districts?
Yeah.
No. So the unassigned area doesn't have there aren't any numbers yet.
So what I'd like to do, and what I intended to do on the river district, is again create as many competitive districts as possible. And I would disagree with Commissioner Mathis that the 1 is enough. I think we can create more than 1 in the Maricopa County area, and I think that river district map 7A did that. So I would like you to look at it.
And I should say at least 1. That's probably a better way to say that. So I'm not saying if you can create others, great, we can take a look at that. But I think 1's reasonable. Any other comments?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
just a question on the District 7. Is that was or was not adopted from the Hispanic Coalition proposal?
Because
it sounds like the numbers changed a little bit.
I think it's got some taken out of the, maybe, I don't know, maybe out of the southwest side to bring in more to District 3, because there were some adjustments on the border between 2 and 3. So I kind of went from 1, 2, 3, and 4, and as it went, it had to take things from 7 down into 3, down into 2. So it may not be exactly what the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government presented. I don't know if Mr. Desmond can say.
It's changed. The Hispanic Coalition for Good Government's HFAP number, I believe, is 60.2 in order to bring the HFAP number up in district number 3. It's almost taken from 7.
Did you not want to then rebalance 7 to meet the baseline?
Well, it's more like just kind of I just kind of tried to get 3 up.
No, I understand. It's certainly something that would be achievable, I would think. Madam Chair, I'm
Yes.
happy to take a run at applying the constitutional criteria to this unassigned area and see what we can come up with.
That would be great.
It does present, I mean, this is apparent from the map. You've got far western Maricopa County, which is granted lightly populated, but very rural and agrarian, and that's probably going to be going into an urban area to get the population, I would think. But anyway, that's something I'll take a look at, and I think we can all hopefully look at and see what we can come up with.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
I don't think it was Commissioner Herrera's intent to say that he was going to work on competition before he worked on the other constitutional issues. So as this develops, by the way, thank you. I think the concept of 3 border districts is incredibly compelling, and I appreciate that that in this compilation donut bagel map that you've created here takes a shot at doing so. I think we heard some real compelling testimony regarding the rural districts today that feed into this concept map that you've created, and looking forward over the next couple of days of exploring this. I also wanted to give special thanks to Strategic Telemetry. I had called them on Friday and made the suggestion about doing the dual presentations. And the reason I'm saying that is because as we are starting to get to the detail, if you look at a map like this, which is at my right, which is blocks and lines and white and orange and yellow, that is interesting. But when we look at the map on my left, you can actually drill down and see streets and house and rooftops and how they line up. And as we're looking at traffic corridors and patterns by looking at the Google Maps version of this, it's going to be able to allow us to really see how some of these communities of interest and traffic patterns and corridors and relationships between communities, geographic features which don't show up on the map to my right. Can't see mountains over here, but you can certainly see mountain ranges over here. So I've asked them to do that. I want to thank you guys for putting that up, because I know technologically it took a little bit of effort so that it was able to work. And it seems to be it'll be a nice working tool for us to be able to utilize over the next couple of days.
Good idea. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Herrera?
can somebody tell me what the population is? I think it's District 2, which is a border, according to your map. What is the population of the people that are living in the border? Because it seems awfully small. It was, so I just want to see, it was almost done to create a border district for the sake of creating a border district, because it looks like that population in that area would be minute compared to the rest of the district.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
As Willie is looking up those numbers, I was actually looking at that, doing the same thing, and looking at I-19 as it goes down to the border, that it's probably worth, as we explore this, to be able to capture. I understand the idea that there's a rural side to Santa Cruz County, which is the eastern side, and an urban side to Santa Cruz County, which is the western side. It probably is going to be worth an iteration of us grabbing the urban side to connect that to your essentially the Tucson urban district, to be able to pick that up. And I understand that that probably is going to impact some of the HVAP population that you have for that district, which will reduce it down to more, it being more contemporary with what it currently is.
It does reduce it, and that's actually why I was trying to preserve it, was keep the urban side separate. And we had heard testimony, too, that Santa Cruz, I would prefer to keep counties whole, actually, to the extent possible, but Santa Cruz had given us that input just Friday, and I was thinking, well, maybe there really is this rural-urban divide, and they don't mind being split along it, which is why I used just census tracts, or told Willie to use census tracts and then follow I-19 essentially up, keeping census places whole.
But we might split it in the opposite direction, keeping the urban with the urban component and the rural with the rural component. Just, it's another way to explore this, but it also add more logic to the concept of 3 border districts, is that we've got three large ports of entry, 3 distribution corridors, 2 most specifically, the Yuma port and the Nogales port. But we don't want to neglect the port coming through from Douglas. So that would be able to allow 3 representatives having representation of 3 ports, ports of entry, which I find extremely compelling as a concept.
Madam Chair,
Ms. McNulty?
the border is handled administratively, and there are 2 border sectors. So increasing the border districts to 3 ports of entry doesn't have any bearing on the representation of the border or dealing with the border vis-a-vis the administrative process. I've said that before, so I won't belabor that. I understand the symbolic notion of having 3 representatives along the border, but I don't think administratively that having 3 makes a difference, because you're dealing with, any member of Congress can work on border issues. I'm interested in seeing the changes in the majority-minority districts here, particularly as they move into South Phoenix. And as Mr. Friedman said, we'll be looking forward to exploring that. I agree with Mr. Herrera that on the River District map, an effort was made to put together districts in Central Phoenix based on communities of interest, with the goal of achieving 2 competitive districts in Central Phoenix. There are over 3 million people in that area, and I think that they are entitled to 2 competitive districts if we can construct those consistent with communities of interest in Phoenix and the other criteria, and that's what I will be, that's my goal.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
I'd certainly respect the concept, but not to the detriment of any of the other items. And as I've been reviewing these maps, I can find multiple areas, multiple locations where we are at the detriment of the other constitutional issues. So I'm going to go back to that. I think that the idea of starting to merge these together to a map for exploration is sound, it's prudent, and we need to start looking at areas and issues that we know that are true. And I know if it flies and it quacks, it's a duck. We're going to be able to know that we know what a community of interest is, what a road and a accumulation is. We've had significant testimony and telling us that, and it's very clear some of these works, very clear that some of them don't. I just want to get to that place and start getting to that area, because at the end of this week, our goal is to say we're moving a map forward.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, I would agree with Commissioner McNulty. The issue of the 3 border districts, let me go to the border districts. It is, the border districts is a not only a state level, but a federal issue as well. You can have 10, you can divide this congressional map into 9 border districts, and just go into nice little slivers going up and down, and it wouldn't matter. I don't think they would have more representation or less. I think the people on the borders, the response was probably as great or probably greater that creating more than 2 border districts dilutes their representation, and I concur with that, because I don't really think that creating 3, 4, 5 border districts gives them greater voice. It is a federal issue that not only at the federal level, but I think every representative, whether they're at the border or not, should be paying attention to. So creating a border district that looks like number 8, to me, looks like creating a border district just for the sake of creating a border district. I grew up in the border, and it was an issue for everyone, not just people that live in the border. So I'm wary of this kind of breakdown where you see that the border is so tiny in 2. I mean, I don't know if Willie Desmond has the population, but I'm curious to see, especially comparing it to what the population on the border compared to 3, compared to even 1. I would love to know that, because to me, it just looks odd.
Okay. In Santa Cruz County, District Number 2 has 5,285 people
That are on the border?
in Santa Cruz County. So if you look up on that screen, the red part is about 5,300 people.
5,300 people?
Yeah.
And we're considering that a border district?
Oh,
just,
Mr. Herrera, please. I mean, what we
no,
just
no,
talked
please.
about.
I actually have an opinion.
I know that you got an
whether,
opinion.
wait, let me finish. Whether you disagree with me or not, don't say please. I mean, some of the comments you make are ridiculous, but I don't say please to you. I have an opinion to make, and I would consider myself a border rat. I live in the border, I breathe border, and to me this is something just for the sake of, oh, let's create up another border district, and I don't. That's how I look at it. Whether you agree with me or not, I would want you to respect my opinion, like I respect yours.
Mr. Herrera, unfortunately, I don't think what you just said does. But I was going to say to you that when you're talking about a border district, there are 710,000 people in that overall district. That this was the first iteration that the chair has come up with for us to review, and I appreciate the fact that she's making a view of looking at a compelling discussion regarding 3 border districts, which we'll intend to explore at great detail over the course of the next week. And this is it couldn't be any more of an important issue than it is today.
It is an important issue. The border is an extremely important issue, but again, I have my opinion, and if I disagree, that's fine. I think we should all be able to create a what-if scenario and disagree. And I happen to, I mean, obviously, hopefully this is the beginning stage of this particular what-if, because this is really the first time I've seen this. And I have a right to say, you know what, there's been plenty of public comment opposing the 3 border districts. I'm sure you acknowledge that as probably just as much or the same as creating 3 border districts. So I want to make sure that the people that are in favor of the 2 border districts they're also being heard, and I think I would represent them. And again, if you disagree with me, that's fine. But I would ask for you to respect my disagreement as I do yours.
So this is the first iteration of the everything map, and I would suggest that if we could all at least agree to use this map to move forward and make adjustments as we see fit, that would be a good way to move forward so that we can actually have one draft map at the end of this.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
I'd be happy to look into that. I did work on a further refinement to my last what-if, but I would like to go ahead and give that to Willie just because one of the things I was trying to explore was what could we do to satisfy, how could a map look that would satisfy the criteria in the best way possible. I think I would agree with Commissioner Herrera that the Constitution does not prescribe there shall be 1, 2, 3, or 10 districts that touch the border. Likewise, the Constitution does not prescribe that there shall be 1, 2, 3 competitive districts, however that's defined, whether they be in the urban metro Phoenix area or Tucson or wherever. I think it's incumbent, the Constitution makes it incumbent upon us to favor competitive districts, however we define that, when it does not cause a substantial detriment to the other goals. In working on through the whole county's what-if approach, near the end there, and there was more refinement I was going to do to the urban areas so we don't lop off the tops of various cities and we keep them whole. But I was looking ways to configure districts in the urban area that take compactness into consideration, that take municipal boundaries into consideration, that take communities of interest into consideration, which is where I was going with the last iteration, and see how they can be configured to see which one meets those goals and yields the more competitive districts. So I think what I'm going to do with this one is just sort of maybe start that process with this combo map and see what we can do.
Great, thank you. Other thoughts? It sounded like, Mr. Sturts, you wanted to see Santa Cruz becoming whole if this were adjusted to a version, just see another what if on it. Is that accurate, or is there something else you had in mind?
Well, Madam Chair, there are several things that I've got in mind. One, the original three-border district that you had proposed, which was the combo between the River District, is also one that has got there's a lot of components of it that I want to see if they can be rolled into the design that you have just proposed as far as the combo or your bagel.
Well, can we begin doing some of this now, or at least tomorrow, so that we're actually during these meetings getting something done, so we can actually get the draft map finished?
Yes, positively.
I'd like to at least get the congressional grid map done soon. So, and again, I want to stress it's a draft map. So, I think we should either plan to work during the meetings to actually make the adjustments now or tomorrow, once you guys have some opportunity to look at that unassigned area.
Madam Chair, I feel like I need an opportunity to look at this. I also would request that strategic telemetry complete the changes that we requested, that Mr. Herrera requested to the River District map, and provide that to us not later than tomorrow morning.
Okay, so we'll be moving forward on 3 maps now, this one and the one that Mr. Freeman has, and this one?
Yes,
Mr.
so just to clarify, for tomorrow, we plan to have the River 8A and the whole county's 7.
Well, Madam Chair, it won't be too much on mine because I think I can just give it to Willie. I just would like to see him generate the report on it. As for what we do with the bagel map at this point, maybe for tomorrow, I'm not going to, I'd have to think about maybe I'd defer to Commissioner Sturts on how District 2 touches the border, but in terms of adjusting District 7 so that it meets our baseline a little better, perhaps, maybe that's something that could be looked into.
And can I just seek a question from legal counsel on that?
Legal counsel?
If one of the 2 majority-minority districts reaches the old baseline, is there an obligation to keep the same area at the same baseline, or does one have to be at the same area level and one has, there has to be one that meets, assuming that there's still the opportunity to elect?
It's just on a statewide basis. If we start out with 2 where there's an opportunity to elect, we need to make sure that we maintain 2 with an opportunity to elect. They can shift areas and they can shift numbers as long as they maintain that opportunity to elect. So to the extent that there's a lot of changes, you have a lot more analysis to do to make sure that you are preserving that opportunity. And so it's really back to the whole, what do you need to make sure that we maintain that opportunity to elect? Okay.
Well then, that being said, I can adjust 7 up to meet the current benchmark in that district. Are there other changes for tomorrow? I guess one question I would have would be District 4 needs to make up 200,000 people. I'm unclear on where that would be done right away.
District 4 is short 200,000?
Yes. It's short, I believe, 211,000 people.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Another issue is like going back to District 3 that has what I would consider too high of a concentration of a HVAP. So I would recommend that we look at that as well. Not only bringing the other majority-minority districts to at least at a minimum, which I've said before, the benchmark, but 3 I would consider to me, my opinion, would be too high and close to packing. So.
All right. Well, then if it's all right with the commission, I will bring 7 up by taking a little from 3, so that they're both closer to their current benchmark. 7 can go up a little bit, and 3 will come down a little bit.
And Madam Chair,
Mr. Sturts?
by moving all of Santa Cruz County into into your CD2, you should be effectively be able to reduce 3.
Okay. Are these things we want to pursue on parallel tracks then, I guess? One with Santa Cruz whole and one without?
Madam Chair, what, if we remove Santa Cruz County, what, then we need to make up the population in District 2, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, no, actually, if you remove Santa Cruz County,
No, not
you
remove
need to
Santa
make
Cruz
up,
County.
Right.
you need to make it up in District 3. 2 will be overpopulated.
You're going to add the urban portion into that district, then you're going to have to lose more population from that district, is that right?
I believe, if I understand correct, 2 would have all of Santa Cruz County. So that 2 would be a third border district with all of Santa Cruz County. It would need to lose population somewhere else in Tucson or in Pima County.
Yeah, well, I would have a lot of concern about how that was done, so I wouldn't support just doing that willy-nilly, to use a phrase.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
as for the deficit in District 4, I would think we would have to cross into Maricopa County and just try to add as much rural population as we can out of the western Maricopa County, keeping it in sort of farming, agrarian, ranching area as best possible, so it's consistent with the rest of District 4.
What about Pinal County also? Is that an area that should be included at a higher priority or at a lower? Or is the areas like Apache Junction and Gold Canyon and Santan Valley?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
I mean, the areas that all tie together in that part of the city are Apache Junction, Gold Canyon, Santan Valley, Gilbert, Queen Creek. Those are all areas that one roll right into the other. I mean, Gold Canyon's out there by itself, and Apache Junction is a developing community. But you talk about the Santan Valley connecting to Gilbert and Queen Creek. They're almost they roll one right into the other. So I would try to keep that area intact.
Okay.
I would try to work diligently to keep the northern, and you could probably pick Indian School or Thomas, northern Scottsdale and Paradise Valley intact. Probably in the Santan, Gold Canyon, Fountain Hills, East Cave Creek, sort of that area intact. The Anthem, Sun City, Surprise, that sort of grouping up there, all are areas that make sense and stay intact. We've heard, from commissioners one view and from the public and people with different views on the 101. Cities grow in age from the inside out, and the 101 loop, the 202, and the now West Side 303 development, over the next 10 years, the 303 is going to be something that's going to have impact. So I'm looking to see to accumulate the areas in the Western Valley, Avondale, Peoria, Glendale, Litchfield Park, keeping those areas intact. Those are areas that have grown and developed together. And again, when you start looking at Google Maps and laying it on top of it, you'll start to see. There's one other area that I want you to look at as well. There are development areas throughout the state and the high growth areas where there are large tracts, Johnson Ranch, for example, where it's projected to have 30,000 plus developed people, and it's continuing to grow. You're down in Green Valley. You've actually, in a couple of your maps, split development areas because obviously there's no population there currently, but there are actually areas that are master planned for growth. So we need to start looking at those so that they don't arbitrarily, as growth occurs, get split down the middle of a subdivision that doesn't show any population currently, but the infrastructure and the design is coming in. So we'll be able to look at that by looking at both the aerials and the maps simultaneously. That makes sense to you?
Okay. Ms.
Chair,
McNulty?
Mr. Desmond, My perspective would be a little different. I don't think we can balance the population in 4 until we figure out what goes in the middle. I think that, yeah, that's what I think. I think that we need to leave open the flexibility that will get balanced as we work on the districts that are left here. If what Madam Chair is suggesting is that this is kind of an arbitrary ironclad limit for that district and that everything has to be within that, I guess she can explain that, but I wouldn't, just looking at this, I wouldn't view this that way any more than I looked at Commissioner Freeman's map that way. I think what we're being invited to do is try and reach some sort of agreement on this, but I don't think that means it has to be within these boundaries. I also just want to make the point, we do this over and over and over again, we've been doing it for months. We have very different perspectives on what competitiveness, what the role of competitiveness is. And the whole reason this commission was created was to foster fair and competitive districts. And 30% of this state is Republican, 30% is Democratic, 30% is independent. We need at least 3 truly competitive districts in this state. We have an opportunity to create 4. We've been having kind of a petty dispute about whether the established neighborhoods that are south of the 101 or we've been having a petty dispute about 101 to try and avoid talking about the fact that the established neighborhoods south of it do in fact create an opportunity for a 4th competitiveness district to evolve over the next few years. I'm still interested in that. I think it would be a lost opportunity not to do that. And I think the citizens, the people in Phoenix deserve a truly competitive, 1 or more truly competitive districts.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Freeman?
Unless we know how we can draw these maps in a way that meet the first 5 constitutional criteria, we're not going to be able to then assess whether favoring competitive districts causes a substantial detriment to our constitutional charge to draw maps that meet those goals. So I think we need to keep that in mind as we're filling in this urban area. I do think we've heard a lot about rural versus urban, and I think that this map gives us an opportunity to further that rural-urban community of interest. In terms of carving up the metro area, I think we need to of course, favor a layout that yields more competitive districts, but we also need to keep in mind how the cities are fit together and how they're laid out. We need to keep in mind, or at least minimizing splits in those cities. We need to keep in mind communities of interest. We've heard lots of, or at least I've reviewed plenty of public comment about areas north of the 101 and how they're tied intimately to North and Central Phoenix, and that comports with my own my view of Phoenix, having grown up and lived most of my life here. There's a strong connection for me to where I live with the North Valley and to areas like Cave Creek and Anthem. So I think those types of things need to be considered too as we put this together. And when we're all finished, I think we need to look at whether we can, what falls out of that, or depending on which ways we fit the pieces together, whether we get districts that are competitive. When we talk about 30%, 30%, 30% in this state, it's not really that way. It's actually, I think, and I don't hold me to the numbers, but it's like 35% Republican, 31% Democrat, and the remainder independent. And after you create those 2 voting rights districts, actually that spread between Republicans and Democrat registration becomes much greater. So if we do get it, it looks like even with this map as developed so far, we get a couple of districts that are competitive. I think that's very good. If another competitive district falls out of the Phoenix metro area, that would be great. But to start with the premise of I'm going to begin with street level changes to a revision to a map to try to engineer a competitive district at the detriment of all the other constitutional goals, I don't think is right. I don't think it's right to, if the virtues of being a competitive district are what people say they are, then it applies to everyone in this state. And while it may be that people living in CD4 as constructed, that's a pretty heavily constructed, heavily Republican district, it is on all of our maps that we've developed so far. To say it's impossible to put those people in competitive districts, not true. I think no one's explored that. But I think it's not going to happen because in order to place those people in a competitive or a more competitive district, you're going to have to run roughshod over things like compactness, over crossing municipal and city lines. It's going to be a very funny looking map, so it may not be possible there. But in urban areas, I think the population is denser, it's more evenly spread out, more or less, and it's possible then to construct districts that are compact, that respect municipal boundaries or at least minimize splits to them, that respect communities of interest, and to meet those constitutional goals, and then favor the configuration that yields the more competitive result. So I'm looking forward to at least taking a crack at filling in the hole in the bagel here.
Madam Chair,
McNulty?
I'm sorry. We've had this discussion so many times, and I apologize for having it again. But I disagree with everything Mr. Freeman just said. Competitiveness is not last. The Supreme Court said it was not last. The purpose of Proposition 106 was to achieve it. These 6 criteria need to be melded together to achieve a whole. Nobody is running roughshod over anything. We have looked at competitiveness and developing competitive districts in the context, and after having considered and considering with all of the other criteria, and we'll continue to do that. And as I said a couple minutes ago, we have a fundamental disagreement on this commission about the importance of competitiveness and how it factors into the other criteria, and I don't think that's going to change. Doesn't make any of us wrong, I guess. Just means we have a very strong difference of opinion, and I expect that will continue. But I will be looking for true competitiveness for the citizens of Maricopa County. I don't think there's any reason that we cannot achieve that, consistent with all the other goals of the Constitution. I think that's what we're charged with. I think that's the whole reason this commission was set up, and I don't intend to ignore that.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, every time we talk about competitiveness, we have a couple commissioners accuse a couple of commissioners that we're ignoring the other criteria. And I listened to Commissioner McNulty. I don't think she ever said that she wanted to ignore the other criteria. She understands the other criteria are important. And so when people say that they were going roughshod or we're ignoring the other criteria, again, they keep saying that, and it kind of bothers me because it isn't true. Commissioner McNulty knows the 6 criteria well, and she understands that the 6 criteria is equally, although it was on the number 6, is equally as important as the other criteria. And we're taking all the criteria as seriously as competitiveness. But this is not an easy process. You know, but again, when we talk about Prop 106, I think the people that voted for Prop 106 wanted to, and they stated it pretty clearly, wanted to get this out of the commission, out of the legislators' hands. The legislators were not creating competitive districts; they were creating districts that served their best interest, and typically that's not competitive districts. And I think the people that voted for Prop 106 spoke very clearly. We want to get this away from the legislators and in the hands of an independent commission that will honor all these criteria, including competition, which is, I think, key. It definitely is important, because you don't have competition, why vote? And I think there's a lot of people, the reasons they don't vote is because there is not competitive districts. So again, when we're creating these maps, we're taking all the criteria into account.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Freeman?
You know, the last instructions on the so-called River District map, there was a district that started in the far West Valley in Buckeye and came over and grabbed Sun City West, went over the top of the Phoenix metro area, cutting off the tops of Peoria, Phoenix, Cave Creek, I believe, and Anthem, and got North Scottsdale, and I believe, well, then we had a river district, River District 4, that came over Phoenix. Now, granted, rural districts, the notion of compactness is a little different in my mind, but it wraps around the north part of Phoenix and had two tendrils, one that cut through Apache Junction, it went south to grab the Santan Valley, and another one that dove into the Phoenix metro area and grabbed an area of North Scottsdale. I mean, if we were still on that, I was going to recommend that you go ahead and extend that on and put Paradise Valley in the River District, because if the goal is to pack as many Republicans in one district as possible, you probably find a few there. And you might even want to drop a tendril down just south of Paradise Valley, and you'd get a house that had 2 more registered Republicans in it. I don't think we should be doing things like that. I think one thing I'd agree with Commissioner McNulty on, as she said earlier, is we need to put together a map that fits together the way Arizona fits together, and I agree with that. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. We need to keep in mind that when we get finished with these maps, they're going to be published in the paper, and when they appear on the front page of the paper, they're not going to have, those maps aren't going to have all the fine details that we see here up on our screens. It's going to be a map of Arizona with color-coded districts. And when someone looks at it, if they see well put together districts that are reasonably compact and sort of fit together in their mind the way Arizona fits together, I think they're going to think we did our job. If they see districts that are odd and peculiar looking, there's going to be questions as to whether something else was going on. So I think we need to sort of keep all the constitutional goals in mind as we go forward on this.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner McNulty?
the way people are going to know whether we did our job is whether people care enough and think their votes counts enough to get out and vote. They're not going to care, well, there'll be a few people who care what it looks like in the paper, but what really matters is whether people feel they have a voice and whether people feel it makes a difference whether or not they vote. That's what our job is, not to make districts that look pretty.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Sturts?
I'm hearing this, and I understand that we've got a disagreement of ideology. But what I just heard Commissioner McNulty say is that competitive districts, no matter what they look like, however they go in whatever direction that they go in, is more important than anything else.
Mr. Sturts, that is not what I said, and as I said earlier, you can say it as many times as you want to, and I know you will, but that doesn't make it true.
But that's what you just said.
No, it's not what she said.
Would you please read back the transcript?
Let's prove them wrong.
You don't have to do
Do we
that,
need-
Michelle. No, you don't really need to. It's just Mr. Sturts reinterpreting what I said. What I said is what's going to matter is whether people feel as though it makes a difference to them to get out and vote.
Madam Chair, I'm just trying to describe that as you described it, you said that how the public is going to look at the maps as they appear in the paper. They're not going to care what they look like as long as they come out to vote. And I know that you've equated coming out to vote as being based on competition, that the higher the level of competition that there is, the more people that come out to vote. And I wanted to go back to something that you said last Thursday about you and I living in competitive districts. Legislative District 28 is not a competitive district. Congressional District 7 is not a competitive district. Neither one of those two are. And those are the districts that we reside. So it's clear to me that if we wanted to look at 14th Amendment issues, I'm one of the disenfranchised that live in Legislative District 28. But I don't feel that way because I live in an area that I chose to live in because, and I understand it clearly, I live near the University of Arizona. It's most particularly populated by people that are very similar in the way that they look at life. There's a lot more Democrats living there than Republicans, almost 2/3 to 1/3. And I recognize that, but that's a community that I choose to live in, but it's a community of interest. That is by no means a competitive district.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Herrera?
I would recommend that we move on before we have commissioners putting words in the mouth of commissioners that they didn't say. I find that, it just bothers me when, you have a commissioner that is pretty clear in what she said, and then we have a commissioner saying, no, she said this. I think she should know what she said. So let's move on. Commissioner McNulty has been pretty clear that she cares about all the criteria, and we keep saying things that people don't say, and again, let's move on.
Okay,
more
I
productive.
go ahead.
Like, if you can move on to something a little more productive.
We can, as soon as I have a chance to say something?
course you can say
Okay,
something.
great. I would like to say that from the Constitution, our mission, it says this, oversee the mapping of fair and competitive congressional and legislative districts. So I think Ms. McNulty's right. I also think Mr. Freeman's right, that, you know, the way it's laid out and how we look at this, we equally weigh all of the other criteria, and if we can create a competitive congressional district that you know, creates no significant detriment to the other goals in doing so, that we should do so. And that's where I maintain that if we can do that in Metro Phoenix, I think that would be wonderful. It does, if there's a way to do a Metro Tucson and a Metro Phoenix competitive district that isn't, you know, detrimental to all the other criteria that we're dealing with too, that we should do so. And to me, competitiveness is you know, a district in which neither party has a built-in advantage, and that's my definition of it. And I know we haven't agreed on exactly the measurement we're going to use, but I just think that that they're both right, and we need to work together to kind of move forward. And so I agree with Mr. Herrera on this too, that let's move on to the next thing if we can. But I want to get some concrete advice from Mr. Desmond on what we're doing on this congressional grid map, because tomorrow we will be in Tucson at 9 a.m. and I would like to have some kind of forward progress on the everything map, and then what Mr. Freeman has done and then has suggested, and I guess if it's Mr. Herrera's River District, I'm not sure, but whatever we have to do, but I'd like to see you guys attack the everything map and make adjustments as you think would satisfy, you know, what you believe you've heard from the public and what makes the most sense given our constitutional criteria.
Is this on our website right now?
I don't know, Buck, you don't have this one on the website yet, do you? Oh, you do? Okay, it is. So on the website, it's called 3 Border, 2 Rural.
I think it's actually called 3 Border, 2 Rural, 1 Donut.
Oh, on the printout, it just says 3. Maybe we need to change that to bagel now. But so any thoughts on, maybe you can, I know you've just gotten this today, if you could look at it and provide some direction and guidance through Mr. Bladine to all the commissioners as to what you're thinking and how you might carve up the center too, that would be great. I would really appreciate it.
So can I just clarify then for tomorrow? Is there any changes to it? Do we want to adjust District 7, or should we wait till we have further input before doing that?
I think 7, I mean, this is just my opinion, but, you know, we want to ensure we maintain the majority-minority levels that we have to, since it is a benchmark district. So whatever has to be done to do that, plus, you know, I think it is, all of this everything touching that center is impacted in some way, and so some of those lines are going to be tweaked in different ways. And I would hope that commissioners, I know that they've, on other maps, suggested different carve-up of the center, and if that can be, you know, kind of worked into this framework, I would think that would be a way to move forward.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
What I'd like to do, I mean, I gave my comments on this particular map that we're talking about, but I'd like to take some more time, because really this is the first time I've seen this particular map, and although there's things that I do like, there's other things that I disagree on, I'd like to hopefully take today and tonight to look over and probably give Mr. Desmond or Ray some of my comments and how we can improve this map going forward.
Okay, and I guess that's fine, and thank you. And I think that maybe the way to do it, since each of you may have different ideas on this, is we explore those in the session tomorrow, because I think that's the only way that then we can all talk about them and actually make some decisions.
Okay, so for tomorrow, I'll leave this one just as it is, but we're ready to you know, play around with it a little bit, explore some possibilities as a group. Commissioner Herrera's River District 8A will be ready for you guys. I'll try to send the block equivalency file tonight, and then certainly tomorrow morning we'll have it ready to go. Commissioner Freeman's whole county's maps, although I think you might need to provide me a little bit further guidance. If you want to do that offline or right now, either is fine with me. We'll also be ready for tomorrow morning, too.
Great.
I can just give you what I have.
Let's do that.
Okay, any other comments on congressional?
Ma'am, is it okay we take a break?
It's 2:47. Do we want to take a quick break?
Well, I do.
Okay.
Whether you take a break or not, I do.
Okay, we'll take a quick break for, how about 5 minutes? It's 2:47 p.m. Okay, we'll enter back into public session. Recess is over. The time is 3:05 p.m. And we are on agenda item 4 now, review, discussion, and direction to mapping consultant regarding the development of a legislative districts map. And we've got 2 in front of us, so I will ask Mr. Desmond to tell us what he's done for us.
Okay, there is 2 for today. The legislative grid map what if scenario, 9 minority districts, option 1, version 6B, is something that Commissioner Freeman had asked for. The email where he kind of laid out what he wanted is included as part of the criteria parts of it. So kind of gives you the thought process. There are some areas where we have to make up, there are population deviations that would need to be corrected in a later iteration, but I tried to respect kind of the direction I was given to the utmost, and so I didn't balance anything that much beyond where it was mentioned to specifically do so. So I will, I guess, bring that one up, and then if you want to just kind of walk through some of it. Okay.
Just as well, first of all, this is a very tough nut to crack, because with congressional districts, we're dealing with 9 puzzle pieces. Now we're dealing with 30. And every time you make an adjustment to one legislative district, it causes a ripple effect that goes through the entire map, and all of a sudden it's 2 in the morning and you're still playing with the map. But to try to chip away at the block, the approach taken that I took was to sort of take the same sort of approach as with the whole county's approach I took on the congressional side, which is sort of to start with the outside of the state and work your way in, and trying in working from the outside in, looking at trying not to split counties. And in that way, you end up constructing, my thought was, you maximize the number of rural legislative districts that sort of go around the outer boundary of the state. You keep them rural, and you end up respecting county lines. So I actually started with the district that, moving the lines that overlaid sort of the Mojave County area, and sort of adjusted those lines to follow, and I don't want to zap Jose with my pointer, so don't look at me. So created that one, which includes Mojave County south of the Grand Canyon, and picks up La Paz County, a nice looking river district, actually, legislative district that follows the Colorado River. And then I worked my way around the state, and then where it got more challenging, sort of moving up from Tucson into the Phoenix metro area and building compact districts that sort of aligned with communities of interest. One thing I see that jumps out at me is this district, which is District 5, and my laser pointer has died, like everything with batteries we have. Anyway, thank you. The instructions, I think my instructions probably got garbled on this district. This district was a product of our grid map. There was this, or a subsequent iteration of our grid map when we included tribal lands and kept them whole, and it was this U-shaped district, and that's not what I intended. I think I had intended to take the southern part of Navajo and Apache County and work downward, include the San Carlos Apache tribe and the White Mountain tribe, including the little part that goes into Pinal County as a district, perhaps having to cross over in this area to pick up more population. That's going to leave this northern district a little less, so I assume that's Flagstaff you grabbed there, that was part of the instruction.
Yeah.
And we're going to need to make up that population there and rebalance down here. So that's sort of one sort of initial sort of adjustment. Working in towards, I think there was an issue, Mr. Desmond was telling me, with the Pinal County districts that sort of run from the north part of Pima County northward in terms of population balance. Is that correct?
Correct. So that District 8, which is the blue one, and District 11, which is the yellowish one below it, are both overpopulated. District 8 is our most off of all the districts. It's a full 138,000 people over. District 11 is 56,000. So there is, looking at the table of where things need to get made up, it does look like a lot of the areas in Maricopa need to grab a little bit more of that, perhaps. I think if you look at this, it's clear that it was intended to go right up to the county boundary. So I didn't want to start splitting counties or anything like that.
No, I appreciate that. And I'm surprised they're both overpopulated, but it is what it is. And I'll have to go back and look at that. I don't think changes to District 5, those adjustments would impact that area. Perhaps it would, to make that area of the state, the eastern area of the state, work.
Okay. Also, with District 5 and District 7, they do have about the same population imbalance. So that District 7 is about 38 or 39,000 people overpopulated. District 5 is about that same number underpopulated. So that might be a logical place.
Sounds like an easy trade-off, yeah.
To balance those, but you might, you're going to lose some areas. So.
But can you get that eastern Arizona district that includes the southern portion of Navajo and Apache counties and takes it down and includes Graham and Greenlee to eliminate that bottom part of the U, which is over here?
That we could certainly look at that. I mean, I know it's very tedious to go through these ledge maps in session, but it's either that or maybe you and I could schedule a time to sit down and work either before or after over a lunch break or something on one of these this week, just to kind of put together the next. I can help you walk through weighing things, but and making sure districts get equalized population, but it's tough for me to make judgment calls without express.
Right, I understand. It's tough for me also on the fly
Yeah.
to make the call as we sit here. Maybe can you zoom in on the Maricopa County area or the Phoenix metro area?
Is this what you're looking for, or zoom in more?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I was trying to look at sort of the rural area to the west, keeping it together, and there is, as this intrusion goes in, that's essentially agrarian area as well. So I was trying to keep that area, Buckeye, Goodyear, together, trying to piece together other parts of the valley sort of as they're laid out on the map, with the West Valley communities going in that direction, Phoenix going up there to the county line, and likewise with the East Valley, Scottsdale area going up to the top of that city. So that was a thought process there, trying to keep them compact. Of course, there's some minority districts in there, which we pretty much, I believe, adopted from, at least at this first cut, from the Hispanic Coalition.
And I do want to say something about minority-majority districts. In both This one, option 1, version 6B, and the other one we're going to look at today, option 2, version 7A. We do lose majority minority district, so again, I allowed that to happen, I guess, just because I didn't know which priorities should be cut, but I think both of these are going to have to be adjusted at some point to again get back to at least the 9, and then pending, I guess, some further analysis by Ken and Dr. King, potentially look at maybe getting a 10th coalition or something. I'm not sure exactly where that stands. So, I think you guys, the criteria, Bruce has made it pretty clear that there is one that kind of supersedes everything else, and so we need to make sure we have the correct number of majority minority districts in order to get pre-clearance.
Well, I agree. We need to make those adjustments in a further iteration. It wasn't, although that it is paramount, it's federal law, it must be complied with. It wasn't exactly on the forefront of my mind as I was just trying to get a map that fit together 30 districts that made sense to me in the way Arizona is laid out. And I had hoped that I'd capture 9, but it looks like I captured
I think it's 8.
8. All right, well, not too bad. So I guess that's something I'll have to work at. But it looks like there's perhaps a couple that are adjacent that could be adjusted and maybe create another one.
Okay, any other comments? Do you want to, are there, and I would just say too that, we have the time, this is why we're all here. If there are things we want to adjust and try out now, that we should. I know we have another map to go through, and I'm not sure how Ms. McNulty, was this the 7A? Yes. And do you have things you want to walk through with it too? I'm just trying to get a sense for the time.
No, I don't, actually. This was my second set of revisions, and what I did was try to balance some of the wild, population imbalances that resulted from the first revisions. I built in the Arizona Minority Coalition, majority minority districts in Phoenix, and then I worked out from there. Since we did this, I've done a lot of additional work, but I wasn't quite able to finish it over the weekend, so I hope to finish it tonight, and I would want to get the whole, and I've made a couple changes to what I had done here. So I'd also, given that Mr. Freeman has now given us his map, like to look at that and see if we have any areas in which we have commonality. I see some pretty significant differences in southern Arizona already on the 2 maps, but in the interest of trying to reach some sort of agreement, I'd like to look at what he's done and see if there's any commonality with what my thoughts were, and see if...
Madam Chair?
Thank you. That is music to my ears. I would love, that was my concern, is having these 2 versions that we need to try to bring these together. So if somebody can be, more than one person be looking at this and thinking about, how we might, where the areas of difference are and what we might do to combine, that would help.
Yeah,
Mr. Herrera.
Thank you. What I'd like to see, if can we focus on some of the commonalities between these 2? I think that would help. Because there is quite a few differences, so I want to see what the commonalities are between the 2.
Yeah.
Version
We could talk about that now.
Oh, I agree with that, but my map isn't, it's only halfway done, so I don't think that works yet.
Okay.
I mean, all I did was
It looks
that work.
good.
I did
It
that work
looks
in
done.
southern Arizona, and then I did the work in central Arizona, but I need to finish. I think before we can do that, we need to, at least I need to have finished the map with all my thoughts.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
And I think this question was probably directed at Mr. Desmond. Do you think the changes that Commissioner McNulty had proposed for the whole map would be done by tomorrow, so we can look at it? We can compare both option 1 version 6B and option 2, version 7A,
I haven't given them to him yet.
then never mind.
I need to do that. That's what I'm planning to do this afternoon and tonight, is finish those, so I can give them to him. If I can finish an actual map, I'll give you the map.
Okay. And then, yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
Commissioner McNulty, I'm not sure if I heard correctly whether or not you said that you were using from the core of Maricopa County the Hispanic Coalition maps or the Arizona Minority Coalition?
Arizona Minority Coalition, I don't believe we have state maps from the Hispanic Coalition. I could be wrong, but.
And do we have, and did we receive the maps on Friday from the Arizona Minority Coalition?
No. For both of these maps asked me to reference theirs. And so using the reports that they had generated, I was able to, I think, fairly accurately reconstruct their districts. But I don't have the actual shape files yet. We've asked for those on several occasions.
So this was.
I think what we have is a PDF with the pictures.
Yeah. So they had provided screen captures that had the voting tabulation districts that make up a lot of the district, and then they also had individual district screen captures that had some of the major roads. And using those, I think I got fairly close. I might have been a little bit farther off on Commissioner McNulty's map. Commissioner Freeman, I think you had kind of referenced how things looked in there and asked me to use it. So there's some areas where it might not be exact, but I think Commissioner Freeman had said just take it directly from there. So I worked a little bit more at just taking it verbatim.
All right. Well, this is the first time I've seen what you did, so I'll look at it tonight. Thanks.
And Madam Chair, well, I think one of the difficulties was that right now we've got input from one Hispanic group on just 3 legislative districts, and we've got to get up to 9 benchmarks. So more input on that, the better, and I think that would make that easier for us.
Mr. Desmond?
I was just going to say that the one district the one majority minority district is that everyone seems to pretty much agree on is the Native American one. So I guess there'll be some discussion on whether or not Flagstaff's included or where it goes through Coconino County and stuff. But I think everyone at least is in principle agreeing that the Pi tribes should be with the Navajo and the Hopi and down to the Apache. So that's a feature that's in both maps. So all of those areas are linked together.
Thank you. I would ask legal counsel too, and maybe it's a question for staff, but I think we're doing some outreach to some other groups, Hispanic groups in particular, to get some more input on some of this information. Is that true? I know we've had offers from folks coming in and saying they're happy to.
If staff may want to supplement, but we have kind of ongoing outreach, and we've been trying to expand that to reach more Spanish language media. And to the extent that we've had public maps submitted, and I think there was one for Tucson that looked like it was trying to draw a minority district in Tucson, and I forget the name of the fellow who submitted it, or the person who submitted it, but they reached out to that person to see if they'd want to come and present. So those are the additional efforts. And then I did follow up with Mr. Miranda to see if there was going to be, other, like a statewide map presented. So we're trying to get more information on what might be presented to the commission.
Thank you. Okay, so that's ongoing. Any other comments then on these legislative scenarios that anyone wants to talk about now? Mr. Herrera?
Just like I said, I'd definitely love to see both of them completed. I don't know if Commissioner Freeman had any more changes to that particular version of his map, but if he does, if he can make the changes and have them both ready as soon as possible so we can compare the commonalities between two and see if we can come up with one version.
I agree.
I'll do my best, but I do need some sleep.
Thanks. Okay. Ms. McNulty?
Just a question, the red on, Mr. Desmond, on the data sheet,
Yes.
that's where it falls below, is that?
Well, those are,
what are those red things?
Those are cases of either a coalition or a plurality
Okay,
majority or minority district.
all right.
So again, plurality where Hispanics are the largest group, and then plurality where Hispanics and other minorities make up a larger share than whites, who are the largest group.
Okay, thanks.
So, and I believe in our currently there's 4 majority minority districts, and then there's like 3 plurality coalitions and stuff.
Just for the benefit of the exhausted and sleepless commissioners, if you could highlight all the figures that comprise the plurality
Yeah.
on these, that would be helpful. Not right now,
Okay.
but when you do these displays, I mean, I see them, but it'd be really helpful just to have the plurality districts for you to highlight all of
Okay.
the minority figures that make them up.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Have we reached out to the groups that ended up suing the commission 10 years ago, basically the minority coalition groups, to see if they can be involved in terms of what they're needing from us? If we haven't, I'd recommend doing that.
With whomever, and they have a broad list of community groups in addition to the media contacts. I don't know precisely, what individuals were associated with that group last decade. As Mr. Miranda said, the folks have evolved to some extent who've been working on redistricting issues. So if there are specific individuals or groups that you have in mind, we can add them to the outreach list that we have ongoing.
Sure. I guess I'm thinking of MALDEF comes to mind, but they may already be involved in some way.
Yeah, the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government noted that MALDEF is supporting their maps. MALDEF is on our email outreach list, and they came to one of our meetings. They came to the meeting in the public hearing in Central Phoenix, but we haven't heard from them on legislative maps either.
Along those lines, one of the things we also need to be telling them, and maybe we already did, but the whole scrambled precinct data issue, to ensure that everybody is, got the right information. And I know that now Strategic's working on the 0406 data, is that correct? Because there's the same issues with that data, and we need to ensure that they're aware of those correct precinct names. And
Yeah. For 0406, we had received a file that appeared to be, matching the election results to the 2000 blocks file, which would have been a very good starting point for us and saved us a lot of time. However, doing some validation, we noticed a lot of the same types of problems in scrambled precincts and inconsistent congressional districts from 2004 to 2006. So we're going through the process of improving it all and making sure we have a match. Once that information is ready to present, we'll probably do a similar presentation and make that available on the website so that everyone who's using election results has apples to apples to compare. So,
do we have a sense of when that will be completed?
I'd have to defer to Ken on when
It's in the
0406 is going to be ready.
Okay. We'll ask him later.
I think he's shaking his head that he is. He doesn't know right now. So.
All right.
It's on our
To-do list.
Yeah, and I did a lot of the last one, and I've been pretty occupied with what-if maps. So we're working on it continually.
Okay. Any other questions or comments we want to talk about on legislative? Okay, and you
So
have
then
your,
for tomorrow, I guess we can just, if the commissioners who've asked for these maps or any other commissioners have the chance to study them, again, the block equivalency and the plan files are available on the website. We can, open these back up again tomorrow, and maybe if there are some changes, work through those as a group, because we should have time.
great, Thank you. Okay, that takes us to agenda item 5, Executive Director's Report.
Madam Chair, Commission members, we're not going to let you get away today without more books. So we have 2 books for you, one that has all of the newspaper articles and media that have come in since the Commission started, and the second is updating you with the public input that has also come into us since your last book. So please don't forget to go with the book, otherwise I have to carry them back. So as a personal reason in this, besides the fact I know you use them. The only other thing I would like to ask is, Anna, I think this morning sent out a request to all of you asking about availability for next week. And my hope was that by perhaps Thursday, we could take a look again at future meeting and agenda time and prepare a sheet for you that'll talk about the week starting October 3rd. So we are working on that. Christina is not here today because she has started working on setting up round 2 activities and contacting people and trying to locate translators and all things that go with that. So probably during this week, one or the other of us will stay back at the office and try to work on the things that we need to be getting done on the administrative end. And I think that's all I have at this point to report.
Any questions for Mr. Bladine? I just have one comment on the scheduling, and it is the next agenda item, future meetings.
Okay.
The week of October 3rd. So the 3rd and the 4th would need to be in Tucson due to some work meetings I have that are standard that I really need to be at. So, but the rest of the week is open. So to the extent commissioners can keep things open for next week, we probably need to do that. So if anyone knows of any commitments they have now, to sure, feel free to say them. But
Story.
I beg your pardon?
You know my story.
Yes, I do know your story, and we appreciate it very much.
okay.
Madam Chair, the only thing, again, nothing has changed for me other than those Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays where I do have prior commitment and I need to be there by 6 o'clock. So I have no issue with, we have meetings in Tucson, of course, as long as I'm able to leave by a certain time to get to Phoenix by 6.
Okay, I think we have those as regular meetings on the schedule, but we'll double check all that, and then I'll give you a chance to look at what Anna sent out and then come back to you and do what we're doing now. But anything you can give us now, we'll put on, but certainly we'll have other shots at it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay?
Thanks very
Thank
much,
you very
Mr.
much.
Bladine.
Mhm.
The next item on the agenda we just covered, unless anyone has any future agenda items, that anything we haven't covered that we need to in any of those future meetings that anyone wants to raise. Otherwise, our agendas are pretty much looking the same at this point. We have a lot of recurring items that we need to address. But if anyone does think of anything, be sure to raise that for Mr. Bladine's spreadsheet. That takes us to agenda item 7, report legal advice and direction to council regarding Attorney General inquiry. I don't know if there is an update, but we can do public comment before or after, if there is one.
Madam Chair, it might make sense to do public comment first.
Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and go to agenda item 8. And I've got a number of input sheets. The first speaker, okay, is Shirley Dye, Vice President, Northern Gila County Republicans. Okay. So I don't think Shirley's here, so we'll go to the next. Moher Sidwa, representing Self.
Hi, Moher Sarah Sidwa. You all know where I stand on various and sundry issues. Earlier today, we were looking at maps, and I just want you to keep in mind that you did indicate that you would take into account the inmate populations. I was not going to bring it up before, again, yet when we had the commission hearing at, I guess it was at the casino, somebody from Pinal County mentioned that there were only 9,000 prisoners in Pinal County. Florence alone has 11,000, then not to mention, then there's Picacho, and then there's 4,000 plus on Eloy. So I think they had the data wrong, and because they mentioned it yet again, made me realize that there's something perhaps that we have to be even more careful about, otherwise why would they be pushing the issue that much? So just kind of keep that in mind. About a month and a half ago, I gave you all a map with where all the prisons were located. So just kind of keep that in mind also. About 2 months ago, I gave you a graph showing competitiveness correlated to voter turnout. You all have it. Please look at it again, and you will see the more competitive a district, the higher the voter turnout. And because the lack of functionality in governments, including Arizona, tells me that competitiveness of the district is the most important issue. Otherwise, a lack of competitiveness forces candidates from both sides of the aisle to cater to the ideological purity of the activists within the party to the exclusion of solving problems or engaging in critical thinking. Critical thinking being the key word these days. And this does lead to voter apathy, and it hurts the very concept of democracy by making a mockery of the democratic process, and that is not American. I don't think any of you would disagree with that. I would like to caution you on one thing. I have seen very decent people who are elected officials speaking for themselves or not speaking for themselves. They have a certain agenda. Keep that in mind, and keep in mind where they're coming from. So whereas they are all honorable people, both sides of the aisle, but I have seen some very interesting maps coming from them and interesting numbers coming from them. We do not need a district to be 70% or 68% one particular, say, a minority for it to be competitive. Otherwise, it really does dilute their influence nearby. It's just something to keep in mind. And that goes for all sides. So once again, I would like to say, really, I'm pleading with you, do not discount where the inmates are. Otherwise, we have a constitutional issue with the 14th and 15th Amendments of one person, one vote. And I've gone over that before. I think I'm just reminding you of that. And competitiveness, and keep an eye on the prison issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Barry McCain, representing Self.
Good afternoon. My name is Barry McCain. You don't want me to spell it? BarryMcCain. I've been watching the proceedings, and one thing, there's a lot of maps here that you're looking at, and everybody has a little input here. Being ex-military, I can tell you about any kind of fighting you want to talk about. But when it comes to maps, one thing I've noticed that I think needs to be said, that we should take what we agree with, put that down first, and then what we don't agree on, we run down time to where we should be concentrating on those differences. But the agreement stuff is just get it out the way so you can get more done. But one thing also noticed that I think that needs to be addressed, that there's been a lot of work done here that I'm aware of, and I don't know everything, but I really do appreciate each and every one of your inputs from what I've seen, and I think you should applaud yourself. So we're running down on time. First thing we got to do is re-energize and be thankful for what's already been done, and I appreciate it. I have full confidence that you'll do well. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lynn St. Angelo, representing Self.
Lynn, L-Y-N-N-E-S-T period A-N-G-E-L-O. My comment today is just one. It's on the putting the maps online. A lot of people are following the procedure online. They come home after work at night, and I've been actually able to watch what happened in the day. Last week, though, that kind of got, I don't know what happened, probably late night meetings and a lot of early morning meetings got on top of each other, but that's probably not going to get much better because that seems to be how it's going now. So I would ask that whoever is doing that, getting them online so that people can watch the meeting. We have Thursday, Friday, and now Monday that aren't up. So nobody can see what happened the last now 3 days. And I would just urge you to probably work on that so that we can maybe within 12 hours or 24 hours at least get the maps up so people can follow along at home. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Roberto Reveles, representing Self from Gold Canyon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Roberto Reveles, 10904 East Sleepy Hollow Trail, Gold Canyon. I'd like to bring a little bit of cultural sensitivity to the description that I've heard. Donuts, bagels. How about the churro? The churro can be twisted into a very fine, delicate pastry.
I'm open to that.
Good. In fact, I personally worked in the Congress at the time when there was a donut. There was one congressman who represented the city of Phoenix and its surrounding areas, and I worked with a congressman who represented the rest of the state of Arizona, which leads me to observe that there isn't necessarily one geographic grouping that will be perfect. I think that there is an opportunity for a hybrid of sorts so that natural resource dependent communities that are producing a product for the quality of life in the urban areas can benefit from perhaps being in a comparable congressional or legislative district, if you will. But of the maps that have been referenced, my inclination is to be supportive of the so-called river district map and in opposition to the whole county's map, as almost the latter being almost indicative of a protect the incumbent line drawing. So I want an opportunity to have my vote be sought after. I want to be in a competitive environment. I don't necessarily want to be packed into a district where, because I'm Reveles, that I will be supporting only a particular candidate. I want my vote to be sought after. And so I encourage that, yes, let's pay attention to all of the constitutionally mandated set of criteria, but underscoring it all is the reason why we're even under Justice Department clearance, that my community, the Latino community, needs competitive districts. Thank you very much. And I'm encouraged by what I see here. I think that there's good give and take, so you've got a tough job ahead of you. I wish you well.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jim March, Second Vice Chair, Pima Libertarian Party.
Hi, Jim March, last name spelled the same as the month. I'll be brief. Regarding the prison issue, in the maps that I've seen the commission generating and discussing, it looks like you're trying to pay some attention to the issue. You're trying to spread out the concentration in Pinal County, for example, among multiple districts, and that's good. That's probably a start. One of my remaining concerns, though, is that it's going to be very hard for the public to comment on it once the official draft release maps come out, because we don't have good data available to us on exactly where the state and federal prisons are in particular, and the INS detention facilities and the private prisons. At one point, your staff put a map up on the overhead at one of the meetings showing only 2 prisons in Pinal County. And I'm sorry, I know that's wrong. I know that's wrong. So, I think there's bad information floating around. It's become very difficult to get good information on this. Our best data I have is from 2000. So what I would ask is you take one staffer and tell them, please, call the Census Bureau and get their data and publish it. Simple. We need that information available on your website, listed among the other data sources you've got online, so that we know where these prisons are, what draft districts they're in, and what their populations are. From there, we can comment on the repercussions intelligently. I simply ask that you direct staff to provide information on this subject. And it's all the more crucial because so far staff has provided at least one round of incorrect information. So let's do that, and let's all comment on what the draft is. Thank you.
Thank you. Legal counsel, can I ask staff about that? Or I believe our strategic telemetry gave a presentation that showed a map of Arizona with the prison populations in stars, and I don't know if we could put that information up on our website and then also have the chart with the backing data showing where it came from and also what the numbers are.
Madam Chair, it's appropriate for you to direct staff to study a matter raised during public comment.
Okay, so strategic telemetry did make that presentation, and maybe, Mr. Bladine, you could get from them that particular chart that has the information. I see Mr. Strasma approaching, so he might have a few words to say too.
I just couldn't resist that, but I'm sure we can post it if Ken can provide it.
Yeah, definitely. And one update, it was mentioned by 2 of the speakers about the census information. Census does have group quarters, population counts, and a subcategory is involuntarily incarcerated. So we'll make that data available as well and work to add that to the reports you're seeing, the number of prisons and number of prisoners.
Great. And we'll get that on our website as soon as it's available. Sure. Our next speaker, David Cantelmi, representing Fair Trust from Cave Creek.
Madam Chairman, members of the Commission, just one brief point, and this is on the legislative side. I just want to remind you that at the meeting at Honda that the Commission held, you received a letter from Chairman Lupe, the chairman of the White Mountain Reservation, indicating that he was good with the existing configuration, and that should be given a lot of weight in my recommendation to you, in my estimation. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rivko Knox, representing Self from Phoenix.
I'm glad Mr. Bladine talked ahead of me, so he lowered the mic a little bit at least. My name is Rivko, R-I-V-K-O. First name, last name is Knox, K-N-O-X. 3134 West Gelding Drive, Phoenix, Arizona, 85053. I wanted to start real briefly and thank you all for what you're doing, both the commissioners and the staff. It's a very, very tough job, and this is my second meeting at which I've appeared, and from the 2 that I've been at, you're doing a very good job, and I appreciate all of you, like I say, including staff. Secondly, I just wanted to say I'm not a cartographer and I'm not a data person, so I guess the question would be, why am I up here? Well, I have very strong feelings about the importance of competitiveness. I've talked to too many people who live in districts that are so skewed that their really attitude is it does not matter. And the reality is it doesn't matter. So it's very hard to get people to really get enthusiastic about coming out to vote and even registering to vote when it's so skewed. The whole county map, to me, idea is rather unrealistic in the sense that county lines are not sacred. I mean, they exist. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but they were drawn by all, just like the state lines, truthfully, drawn in strange ways. And we already have seen in the last few years how communities bleed over county lines, Sedona, Apache Junction, to name two that I'm aware of. And in addition to that, you have, I mean, Pinal County is kind of building up into the Phoenix area, building down to the Tucson area, so I don't see the validity in that. I would really, when I looked at the numbers, and the most recent time I looked at the numbers was yesterday, I was really, truthfully, with this whole county map, horrified to see that there were only 2 competitive congressional districts, when we know the registration in the state is a third. I think that there has been way too much focus on, quote, communities of interest with not enough attention paid to competitiveness. To me, a community of interest represents people who share my views. And by and large, my views are related to things like the importance of public education, environmental protection, a society that takes care of people who are old and sick, and et cetera. And the lines that are based on, I don't know, like I say, county lines are a good example, I think, of a community of interest. I don't think they represent that necessarily. So I'll look really fast at what else I was going to say. I think that somebody has talked about, I think it was also pretty terrifying to me to see that the Phoenix MSA, or I don't know if it's called now MA, I think it's changed, but anyway, has no competitive districts. And it was just horrifying to me to see that. The Phoenix MSA is the 14th largest metropolitan district in the country. It is larger than 24 states, and to have no competitive districts in that, just to me, kind of violated the whole concept of one person, one vote. 2 other really quick comments. One is, we're all aware, obviously, of the Title V Voting Rights Act, but that should not be used to skew districts so there are not enough competitive districts. And my final comment, I promise this really is I wish you could get your schedule up earlier. I had to change my whole day-to-day to get here, and I am on your list, so I get the notices. But it would be really nice as you plan your second round, which will be critical, obviously, to get them out all at one time. Even if you're not sure of the exact location. I mean, if you know you haven't found a spot, and I understand the practicalities of that. But if you know there's going to be these many dates, these times, and the general area like Phoenix or Casa Grande or Tucson, because I think that would generate more people being able to attend. Thank you very much for listening to my comments, and again, thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Lois Fan. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your last name correctly. Flau? Fau. Sorry. So you can spell that for
Madam
Michelle.
Chair and Commissioners, my name is Lois Fau. I live at 1023 West Mission Lane in Phoenix, Arizona.
And can you spell your last name?
PFAU.
Thank you.
85021. And I was going to talk about competitiveness, but Rivko stole all my glory, so I'm just going to leave the word out there for you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Jill Kipnis, representing Pima County Governmental Alliance.
Good afternoon. It's Jill Kipnis, Kipnes. I'm with Robert S. Lynch and Associates, and we represent Pinal County Governmental Alliance. I wasn't really planning on speaking today, but I need to clear up these statistics based on prison population. Pinal County as a whole for 2000 in the 2010 census has a total prison population of 6.5%. That number is 3.4% of the 710,224 people that will make up a congressional district. So again, it's not a very large number. Current Congressional District 1, what is currently represented by Dr. Gosar, so in the 2000 census, prison population was 2.8%. In Pinal County's CD9, which you saw today, so Navajo, Apache, Gila, Graham, Greeley, and Pinal, prison population is 4.1%. So it's a 1.3% increase from 2000. Each district is growing more than 9.5%. So again, it's certainly not packing prisoners into one district or another. Legislatively, there's no problem with us splitting Eloy and Florence. Actually, our maps that we have presented does do that, not necessarily for prison population purposes, because we did not bring that into account when we were building these maps. But we do expect for Eloy and Florence to be split just because of where they are geographically, I-10, and now for prison population. So there's certainly no problem with splitting Eloy and Florence legislatively, but there would be a problem splitting Eloy and Florence, and therefore all of Pinal County congressionally, just to split up their prisons. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Kelly Butler, representing SELF from Paradise Valley.
Hello, Kelly Butler, BUTLER. My address is 5926 North 33rd Street, Paradise Valley, 85253. Commissioners, thank you so much for the Herculean task you are taking on. I can't imagine how mind-numbing looking at all those maps would be over time. And I just wanted to come and talk about competitiveness. And then when I walked in late, I was shocked that there was even a debate about the importance of competitiveness. I thought that was the whole point of redistricting our state, was to allow everybody to have a voice. And frankly, the only way to do that is to make our districts competitive. And I'm a native Arizonan. I hate the extremism that I've seen taken over. And I think the solution is to allow for competitive districts, let everybody have a voice, and let's, like you have been. And also I was impressed at the ability to compromise that I've seen here, and the discussion and differing viewpoints. We need to compromise, and that cannot happen without competitive districts and without a representation for everybody. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I believe that concludes public comment, and so I appreciate all of you coming and sharing your thoughts with us. The time is now 3:57 p.m., and the only item left on the agenda is item 7, which is report legal advice and direction to council regarding Attorney General inquiry. The commission may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public, for the purpose of obtaining legal advice and providing direction to council. So,
Madam Chair, at this point, it would be our recommendation that the commission go into executive session to receive an update.
okay. Do I hear a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, hearing none. The time's 3:58 p.m. We'll exit out of public session and let the public clear out, and then we'll begin executive session momentarily. Thank you. Okay, the time is 4:32 p.m. We'll enter back into public session. And the only item left on the agenda is number 9, adjournment. And so at 4:32 p.m., I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.